So welcome to today's second speak on accessibility. And I'm sorry, I will call it accessibility and not inclusive design, even though I do mean some of the same things. My speech is called Accessibility, Your Single Biggest Missed Business Opportunity. My name is Thyme Nørregaard. I work with a company called Thyme that helps organizations manage their digital presence. We sell tools that helps companies be certain about the digital websites, apps, everything. A very important part of our software is our accessibility software that checks websites for accessibility issues and help the owners fix the issues that there are. I have been working for the last 2.5 years with Thyme, both developing the accessibility software there, but also helping positioning our software. I've recently entered into a role as a digital accessibility product expert. Before that, I was product owner for our accessibility software. I come from a background within a consultancy, both for accessibility and usability, which is also why I'm very excited to be here today talking to the UX community about accessibility, because it brings together all of the things that I've been working with for most of my career, actually. On the site today, except for working with Thyme's accessibility software, I'm also part of a task force with the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium that makes the standards for basically the whole World Wide Web. We are right now working on a standard for accessibility conformance testing. So basically standardizing the way we do accessibility testing today, both automatically through tools, but also manually. I'm also representing Thyme in an EU project that is called Wide Tools. It's an innovation project that's co-funded by the European Commission through a research and innovation grant called Horizon 2020. Where we're going to build the accessibility tools of the future. I'm also on the board of Design for Alle, which is a network here in Denmark that organizes everyone working with accessibility, so both individual people but also organizations. So if you're interested in accessibility, please do sign up for a newsletter there. All right, that was enough about me. I'm here today to make a point that accessibility is not only the right thing to do, the ethical choice to make, but also the smart choice for your business. It's the ethical choice, the right thing to do, because accessibility or inclusive design will help us create a more equal society, a more inclusive society, where everyone has equal access to all information and services. That is basically a human rights concern, and as Molly said, if we don't do this, we'll exclude people, and that's not what we want to do. But accessibility and working with accessibility is also the smart choice for your business, and that is because a better user experience should help you increase your revenue. And since this is a UX conference, I guess that most people will agree with me that UX is the way to create a better user experience and better revenue. I brought this little example here today. It's a story that one of my colleagues stumbled on Twitter. It's a guy called Roger Johansson who tweets about front-end development and accessibility. And I think this little story illustrates very nicely why bad accessibility is also bad for revenue. And I read it aloud to those who cannot read the screen. So he writes, 1. Try to use iPad/iPhone to browse, cite, and buy stuff. 2. Find that site will not zoom. 3. Go to competitor site that allows zoom. 4. Buy stuff. It's that simple. If it doesn't work for you because it's not accessible, then you'll just go somewhere else. I guess you can all recognize it from yourself. If a site doesn't allow you to buy things, why would you spend your time and money with them? You can just go to a competitor instead. So what is accessibility? Well, I brought my favorite definition, and I can see that others have been looking at the same definition for today. This is from an old Wikipedia article. The new one isn't as nice, I think. I'll read it aloud. Web accessibility refers to the inclusive practice of making websites usable by people of all abilities and disabilities. And the reason why this is my favorite definition is that it mentions people of all abilities. So by designing for accessibility, you won't just help people who have a disability, but also help everyone else by building a better user experience. And that's important because all people are different. People have differences in preferences as well as differences in needs. I think Molly gave some really good examples on this. I can also mention that, for instance, if you put videos online, they should have subtitles, and that is because you want to cater for people who cannot hear the audio track on the videos. But it also benefits someone like me who spends a lot of time commuting every day. I spend almost all of my online free time in the metro or in the train, and I don't really bother to dig out my headphones if I'm in the metro packed together with other people every morning. So by designing for accessibility, you'll design also for people who have different preferences. People who take their mobile out in the sun and still browse the website, they will benefit from high contrast, as well as those who are elderly and naturally have lower contrast vision than the older ones, or the younger ones, sorry. So how do we build for all of the different preferences and needs? We do that by building for inclusive design. And basically, inclusive design is a combination of accessibility and usability. It is designing for all the different preferences and needs out there. And this is a question that I'm often asked from companies and organizations that are not yet working with accessibility. So what is the business case for accessibility? Is there a return on investment in accessibility? It all comes down to the money, right? I like to answer this question by taking it one step back and not ask what is the business case for accessibility, but actually ask what is the business case for your service, because these two things are really closely connected. And I do hope you have a business case for your service. And probably you'll already be measuring if you're successful with your business case. I do hope that you also have some metrics in place. Definitely. If you measure success by number of conversions, it's very likely that you do measure it. Often when a metric, or the metric is conversions, we talk about funnels as a way to visualize that you have a large number of people who enter your flow in one end, and then more and more people drop off until only a smaller portion finishes the whole flow that you've set them out to do. This is an illustration from within the Site Improve analytics tool that shows a funnel where you can see that in the beginning 811 people enters this checkout flow, and in the end only 22 people completes the whole flow. There's only 4 steps in between, but only 2.71% goes through the whole flow here. If you have a funnel like this, I would hope you look at your form page 1, because it has a drop-off of 50%. There's only 2 steps in the form, but actually, of those who enters the first page, only 50% goes on to the next page. If you have something that looks anything like this, I would hope that you're analyzing what goes wrong here, and I would hope you're also looking if there are accessibility issues on that page that could account for some of the drop-off. And one example of an accessibility issue with a form is this one. This is also from the Site Improve tool. It's the accessibility module that shows that here, even though these form fields have nice labels, you can see them, they're very visible, they're not coded correctly. So if a person who's blind and relies on a screen reader to read this page, they will actually not know what the form fields are for. And if I was blind and didn't know what form fields I'm entering information into, I might not want to put in my credit card information in the end, not knowing if they have my address, my name, or my email address registered correctly. All right. I also brought a few numbers today. It all comes down to numbers, right? To kind of help build the business case for accessibility. So the World Bank estimates that 15% of the world's population experience some form of disability. Different research has different numbers, but everyone agrees that it's between 10 and 20%, basically. That's a lot of people. If we say 20%, it's out of 5 people. And this is disabilities that will in some way hinder them in their daily lives. All right. There's also a UK survey made in 2016, so the number's a few years old, but I think it has some really, really interesting numbers. It's called the Click Away Pound Survey, and it shows that 71% of disabled customers with access needs will click away from a website that they find difficult to use, just like Roger Johansson did in his tweet. So if you have 15% that might experience accessibility difficulties, and 71% will click away if they do, that's quite a lot of people. All right, the Click Away Pound survey also shows that most businesses don't know that they're losing income because more than 90% of customers will not tell them if they experience accessibility issues. I've often come across companies that say, well, we would know if we had accessibility issues. People would tell us, but no, they wouldn't. And how often have you ever contacted a company telling them that their website doesn't zoom on the mobile devices? Would you ever do that? No. I guess most of us will think that either they know and don't care, or there must be some other reasons for them not fixing it. All right, so if your customers won't tell you that your website is inaccessible, how will you then find out if you actually do lose some income because of accessibility issues? One way to find out is to experiment and measure. This is the think, make, and test cycle of Lean UX. You can also use that for accessibility issue fixing. If you fix some issues and you measure with analytics on how the flow improves, you can see if there is anything to gain there. But basically, if this is the situation you have on your website, it doesn't work so well. So this is a real-life example. This is a tourist attraction in Croatia that has an accessible bathroom. I was there with Site Improve, and I just thought it was so funny. They have a perfectly accessible bathroom, but they use a space in front of it for storage. So basically, no one can get into this bathroom. I'll let it hang so you can take pictures. Basically, if you create a fully accessible checkout flow on your website, it doesn't really matter if the rest of their website is totally inaccessible. If people can't browse stuff that they want to buy, they won't put anything in their basket and they won't be able to check it out. So don't expect to see a huge difference just because you make little changes for an area of the website. Also, even if you made your whole website accessible today, you shouldn't probably expect to have a huge influx of people with different disabilities using your website tomorrow, because they'll have experience with your website saying it's not accessible, and it'll take a while before they find out that it is accessible. And rumors travel on the internet, by the way, among those who have these problems about which websites are accessible and inaccessible. All right. So some more numbers. The Click Away Pound survey shows actually that there is, at least in the UK in 2017, there is probably a potential in this group that click away because of accessibility issues. That is around 10% of the total online spend in the UK for 2016. That is a lot of money. Also, it's not probably divided equally across all industries. Because if you are, for instance, the metro in Copenhagen, there won't be many alternatives to your service. If people need to travel with the metro, they'll need to use your online services, no matter how inaccessible they are. They'll have to try at least. So you won't suddenly get a huge new customer base if you create your accessible services, if you already have monopoly in the area that you're in. It's different if you actually have a service that is in a competitive landscape. Then you might be able to move market share to your service from other vendors. Also, it matters how useful your service is compared to the alternatives. So, for instance, online supermarkets are very attractive to people who are, for instance, blind or have a mobility disability. So if you're blind and want to go shopping in your local supermarket, you go shopping for a can of tomatoes, you have no clue what you'll come home with. It might be a can of pineapples or a can of kidney beans. If you go online in a supermarket, on the other hand, you'll be able to browse for the things that you need to buy and have them delivered to your place without no hassle. The same clothes shopping. If you are in a wheelchair, a big motorized wheelchair, most clothes shops won't have enough space for you to get around among the racks anyway. So there are services where the physical alternative is so unattractive that the digital service could actually gain a very loyal customer group and also have them spend much more money in the digital services than the rest of the population. All right, so this was a lot of talk about conversions. What if your success is not measured by conversions? You might be measuring your success as the ratio of self-service versus support calls. If you're a Danish municipality, you want to move all the transactions online, for instance. That can also be improved by improving the accessibility on your website, and also measured. Also, if you look into brand perception or reputation, accessibility is also a key here, and you should hopefully see improvements to this if you improve the accessibility. All right, so if you focus on accessibility as a way to improve the user experience, there are some side effects, really nice ones, I think. For instance, there has been a little talk about the WCAG now, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. That's an international standard for accessibility. I don't think it's very sexy, but it is very useful. It's basically a checklist of things that you should be focusing on to at least make sure that you're not breaking the user experience. And if you're looking into the standard, you can get help from tools for improving this. You can get free tools and you can get paid tools. And the difference between them are often that the free ones check a single page, whereas the paid ones will crawl your whole website and report back to you. And for instance, let you track your progress over time. But it's important to remember that the standard is not the goal. It's just a stepping stone on the way. The goal is not to follow the standard. It's the goal to have an accessible and inclusive user experience that works for all users. A few examples on how following the accessibility standard could improve your general user experience is, for instance, that it helps you clean up your navigation structure. It helps you be consistent in your icon use, and it helps you have a proper heading structure. All of these things are things you should know already, but here there is actually a checklist for ensuring that you do it, and do it right. Also, if you look into mobile accessibility, it will improve your general mobile usability. There's a new standard for accessibility on its way that, for instance, have guidelines on how big a target should be if you have a touch interface, so that you don't fat finger and click everything at once. Also, it says that your design should fit to screen without two-way scroll, even if you're on a small screen size. So that will be fixing the issue that we saw in Roger Johansson's example, where things don't zoom into his mobile device. Also, you shouldn't be using phrases like "find more" in the box to the left. That's not working well for screen readers. It's definitely not working in a responsive design either, where everything is in one column. So basically, this is a physical example of what I want to tell you about digital accessibility. It shows a stair where there's a ramp designed into the design of the stair, where the ramp is zigzagging up through the stair. And clearly, it wasn't just like put on in the last minute. It's part of the design that makes a better user experience for all. This will work for people who are using a wheelchair, but it will also work for parents with strollers or kids with bikes. Basically, it makes a better user experience for everyone. And this is the idea with inclusive design. Shouldn't be something that you try to add in the end. It should be something that you design for. And you should see it as an opportunity instead of a constraint. I did a test run of this presentation yesterday for some of my colleagues, and one of the guys was like, yeah, that's like that zombie game. And I was like, what? Apparently, there is something called the zombie run game, where they set out to design an app that will work for people who are running, that will motivate them to keep going and keep going faster. They set out with the constraint that it should be something that works for people who run. They do have some accessibility issues if you're running. You can't very well look at your phone while you're running. You can't very well interact with it using your hands. So basically it should be something that works blinded and without arms. So they made a game where you're chased by zombies, and the only thing you get is audio feedback on how you should be going. And it actually gave them a real competitive advantage. And I think we should be thinking in that way, see designing for accessibility as an opportunity to improve your general design. All right, and then there's also the legal side of things. Basically, there is a lot of interest in the legal side of accessibility at the moment. So I'm going to briefly go through it. Because if you're selling anything in the US, you should definitely be aware about the chance of or risk of being sued for accessibility issues. This happens all the time in the US. So please do watch out. There's also legislation on its way in the EU. There's a EU Directive on accessibility of public websites and mobile apps on its way. It'll enter into force September this year. There are some different deadlines for when things need to be accessible. This only applies to the public sector, but it's all levels of the public sector, so both state level, regional, and local authorities. There's also another piece of legislation on its way in the EU. That's the European Accessibility Act that has a much broader scope than the Web App Directive. This will also put up constraints for passenger transport, banking services, and e-commerce, among other things. So to some, accessibility will very soon be a must. To others, it's just a great opportunity. And since I saw on the participant list that we don't have a lot of public sector bodies here, it's the opportunity that you should be focusing on. So if anyone here works with a digital agency, I have a few tips for you now. Basically, the demand for websites and apps that are accessible are expected to rise very soon. For the public sector, it's very soon or already. And for the banks and the transport sector and e-commerce, it's soon going to rise too. So I have 3 reasons for why you should start focusing on accessibility already now if you're an agency. Basically, right now it's a blue ocean. I hear a lot of talk about, can you recommend any agency that can make a digital accessibility? And everyone's like, not really. We know some that focus on it, but we don't have proof that it actually works very well right now. So if you can be accessible or create accessible products and maybe even document that they are accessible, you'll be the only one. There's no competition at the moment almost. Also, if you want to focus on accessibility and make sure that you're there when the demand rises, you need to start building up your competencies soon. Designers and UXers and developers need to be educated to develop accessible products. It doesn't take a lot of time, but it does take some education. And when you have the competencies, you can just do it like you do anything else. You wouldn't create a website where you didn't think about SEO at the moment, right? So it's basically about getting to that level, and then you can actually build products by default that are accessible, almost. And then there is a chance right now to get a head start. If you do it now and position yourself as someone can make accessible products, you'll be ready for the demand when it rises. So basically my point today is that accessibility creates business opportunities. And I do hope you agree with me now at least. And then I have this question. How do I design for accessibility and reap all of the great benefits of inclusive design? I guess that's the question that you all have right now. And for that, I'll just say come to our workshop later. It's going to be right here. My colleague Stein Erik Skottkjær, the lead accessibility strategies at Thyme will lead it, and I'll be there too. Or you can come by our booth out there during the conference and ask us questions. Thank you very much.